Недавно пришла новость, Зеленский заявил, что его встреча с Владимиром Путиным якобы уже...
Говоря о гарантиях безопасности для Украины, кто и как с точки зрения Москвы...
Украинский режим, его представитель...
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Thursday that Russia remains ready for what he called honest talks on security guarantees for Ukraine, but he accused Kyiv and its Western allies of deliberately undermining peace efforts that began to take shape following last week's Alaska summit between Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump, the first such Russia-U.S. summit in more than 4 years. Speaking in Moscow at a joint news conference with his Indian counterpart, Subramaniam Jaishankar, Lavrov argued that the Ukrainian government, with the backing of what he described as its Western sponsors, is not genuinely interested in a sustainable, fair, or long-term settlement of the conflict, but instead seeks unilateral security guarantees that exclude Russia's role. He insisted that Moscow continues to support the principles that were outlined during the Istanbul talks in April 2022, where Russian and Ukrainian delegations briefly explored possible terms for a ceasefire and future security arrangements, and he dismissed attempts to move beyond those discussions as absolutely hopeless, saying they only serve to escalate divisions rather than resolve them. According to Lavrov, the so-called coalition of the willing, made up of key European powers including Britain, France, Germany, and Italy, is engaged in efforts to derail the progress that started to emerge from Trump and Putin's meeting in Alaska. He accused these countries of shifting the international focus away from addressing the root causes of the conflict and towards providing Ukraine with external military guarantees, which he described as a dangerous and unsustainable strategy. Lavrov's comments also turned to the possibility of direct talks between President Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. While Zelensky has repeatedly ruled out direct negotiations with Putin, and even signed a decree 3 years ago formally prohibiting them, Lavrov stressed that Putin has repeatedly signaled his readiness for such a meeting, provided that any agenda is thoroughly prepared by experts and ministers in advance so that only the most essential issues remain for discussion at the highest level. At the same time, Lavrov cast doubt on whether Zelensky would have the legitimacy to sign any future peace agreements, noting that his official presidential term expired in May 2024 but no new elections have been held because of the war. From Moscow's perspective, this raises questions about whether a settlement signed by Zelensky could later be contested by a future Ukrainian government. He added that this problem of legitimacy would need to be resolved if negotiations were to lead to binding agreements. After the Alaska summit, Donald Trump had said that he was already working to arrange a meeting between Putin and Zelensky, possibly followed by a trilateral summit involving himself, which he described as a necessary step to end what has become the deadliest war in Europe since World War II. However, European leaders remain skeptical of Moscow's intentions, warning that Putin's overtures may be more about buying time than securing real peace, and Kyiv itself has called for a strong reaction from Washington if Moscow refuses to meet Zelensky directly. Lavrov, meanwhile, accused both Ukraine and its allies of pursuing policies designed not to build trust or reduce violence, but rather to secure the strategic defeat of Russia. He argued that genuine peace can only come through the kind of collective security framework once explored in Istanbul, where both sides at least agreed on the principles of neutrality and mutual guarantees, but which ultimately collapsed as the war escalated. By revisiting these earlier talks, Lavrov suggested, Russia is signaling that it still sees a potential foundation for peace, but only on terms that include its participation and recognition of its security concerns. With Russia questioning Zelensky's authority, Ukraine demanding stronger U.S. guarantees, and Europe pushing for its own role in the process, the road to a settlement looks as contested as ever. The Alaska summit may have opened a door to renewed diplomacy, but for now the competing narratives from Moscow, Kyiv, Washington, and European capitals leave the prospects of an actual breakthrough highly uncertain.